Tonight's talk is an interesting one, unlike the other ones, which are all so boring. The idea came from two questions that I got from students in class this week. So the first question was from one of the kids. I usually get the best questions from the kids in kids class. And you guys that are parents or spend a lot of time with kids, you know they've got the best questions. They're the ones that aren't like stuck, thinking the same junk and like they're kind of living in a more creative, free way. So this is what we want to get from our martial arts practice, is a great ability to ask questions. I'm going to keep going on this tangent actually. I was talking to the kids earlier today about the ability to ask questions. And what I said is the same thing that I would say to an adult or an old person or whoever you think you are. Nobody ever got amazing at anything. Nobody ever got wise or great at anything without asking great questions. It's actually impossible because people can tell you stuff, but you're only going to get what they're telling you. If you're not asking the questions, there's nothing new that's going to come. There's no growth that happens there. And most importantly, in our own lives, we will never become great without asking great questions. So we want to ask great questions from as many smart, wise people with experience as we can, and then also, most importantly, ask ourselves the great questions. So that's my spiel about questions. Now, we should take these questions that other people ask us and really kind of spend some time with it. So this one question was from one of my students in the Wushu class, and he asked me a couple days ago. He asked me personally, what do you do with your scars? Or how do you use your scars? And I heard his question, and I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, your physical scars or your metaphorical scars. So, your emotional scars are those things that you are attached to. And I thought that's a really weird question. I love it. I had another question today, which was related. It was from one of our Red Sashes asking me about how our practice is used to deal with trauma. And trauma is one form of a metaphorical scar, something that kind of happened and we stuck with it. And I'm not going to talk much about the psychological aspect of it, although it is going to obviously come into play a little bit. But I want to start off with this idea of scars. So I've got a scar. I have very few martial arts scars because martial arts is very safe. And if you're doing it correctly, you should not leave class with scars. But I've got one scar. You guys can see this one actually on the back of my hand here. I've got a very subtle scar that you can't see it on that camera, sorry, but you can see it here. Very subtle scar. This is like, I got this from somebody just scratching my hand once when we were sparring or something. I got a couple of those just from Velcro, from people's gloves. But I've got one scar that's martial arts related that I've had for many years. And it's, I believe, the worst physical scar that I've gotten from martial arts. And it did not happen in class. This happened because I was a kid. My parents put me in Taekwondo, and I hated it. I hated it mostly because I was a kid, and I didn't get what martial arts was. And also, what we were doing in class was not quite as dynamic and varied as what we do here. And so I would skip class sometimes. And let me tell you, I was a good kid. I never skipped school. One time I skipped school, but that was in high school. It was years after this. But up till this point, I had never skipped anything. I was deathly afraid of getting into trouble, but I was just really not feeling it that day. So I thought, I'm not going to class. I'm going to skip class. I'm going to hide. And what would happen was, my parents both worked, so I was at school, and there was like daycare at school after, and I was supposed to walk myself to Taekwondo. And I don't know how I ever did that, or how anybody ever expected me or any other kid to walk themselves from daycare to something that required effort. But I did that, and one day I just had enough and I wasn't going to do it. So I thought, I'm going to hide in the playground at school. And when I tried to sneak into the playground, I saw that the gate was locked, so I had to climb over the chain link fence. And I did that, and I was just like huddled there by myself for an hour, just in the corner of the playground. And then I'm like, all right, time to go. Class would be over by now. So then I left, and I was hiking back over the fence, and I was 8 years old, by the way, at this point. So I'm not very good at climbing fences. I'm hiking back over the fence, and you know at the top of the chain link fence is like this little sharp metal X. And so as I'm climbing back down, it catches and it slices right into me. And I still to this day have a decent little scar right there. And it scared the hell out of me in the moment when that happened. I thought, I'm going to die, I'm going to bleed out right now. It wasn't that bad. I just like washed it off and it was fine. But I still have that scar. And this is one of my favorite ways to use my scars, is I look at them and remind myself how dumb I used to be, and I laugh at myself. So this is a very important part of life. If you cannot laugh at yourself, especially at the dumb things that you did back in the day, you are missing it. You're missing something big, because we all do really stupid things. Especially when we're kids, and look, at any point in the future, you're going to look back on yourself now and think, I was a really dumb kid back then too. And these scars are a reminder for us, and I mean our physical scars, but more importantly and more often our emotional scars, our attachments to these things that we did or these experiences that we had in the past. We want to feel those, have those thoughts, feel those things like they are real, because in that moment they are real to us. And then instead of continuing down that path in our mind of reliving the whole thing and feeling the embarrassment or the shame or whatever it is that we feel, we want to allow ourselves to laugh. Right? I was 8 years old. I climbed over a fence after I was skipping martial arts and I sliced myself up. It was really dumb. That's hilarious. And I don't mean that like to pretend like it was any less traumatic or any less dumb than it was. It was. And when we laugh, it has this healing quality to it. I would say that I'm sure healing on some level actually helps us to heal our bodies, but it for sure helps us to heal our minds. So when we laugh at ourselves, that is one great way to use scars. And that story that we keep telling ourselves about how we messed up, all of that is like a scar. That is something that we should just feel and enjoy, because it is a part of who we are. It is not the entirety of who we are now, but it is a part of us. And this is what I was talking about this morning with the question about how we can use our practice to deal with trauma. So I'll kind of get a little bit more into that later on. There's a great passage in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I refer to this one all the time. I'm actually going to read a little bit of it today. So if you guys haven't read this book yet, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, it's wonderful. So page 20 of it is Mind Weeds. This is the part that I refer to the most. So the start of this says, you should rather be grateful for the weeds you have in your mind, because eventually they will enrich your practice. So there's a saying that the author, Shunryu Suzuki, refers to. He says, we say, pulling out the weeds, we give nourishment to the plant. And he goes on to say, we pull the weeds and bury them near the plant to give it nourishment. So even though you have some difficulty in your practice, even though you have some waves while you are sitting, those waves themselves will help you. He's referring to the mind waves, where our mind kind of goes out of mindfulness and then comes back. That difficulty is like a weed that grows. And if you look at it and think of that weed is like an evil thing or a permanent thing. It's gonna have control over you. It's going to be much more impactful in a negative way than if you look at it and say, all right, this weed is part of my garden. This thought is part of my ego. This is part of my psyche. This is a small part, a sliver of who I am. And what I can do is I can dig up that weed, and as he says, you bury it in the garden that gives nourishment to the other plants. Now, I say this every time as a disclaimer. I am not a gardener, but I'm pretty sure some weeds, if you bury them, that means that they're just going to grow back up. But the idea of taking something, you chop off whatever part of the weed grows back, you throw it out, and then you bury the rest of it. That decomposing organic material, it feeds the other plants in the area, and that gives it nourishment. Well, our thoughts, or these challenges that we have, or these mental scars, or even trauma, this nourishes our practice by giving us a challenge to overcome, and it nourishes and becomes a part of us in a way that we don't often think of. If we don't have challenges, we never get stronger. So obviously there's that part of us that we really crave challenges. This is a big lesson from martial arts, where we learn to see challenges or problems as opportunities. And this happened to me one of the most recent times I was practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what seems like forever ago, I guess was forever ago, over 6 months at least. And the student that I was practicing with was another brown belt, I believe, about the same rank, a little bit more experienced than me, and I had him in butterfly guard, and he grabbed my ankle, and nobody had done that to me, at least recently, and I looked at it and I just was stuck. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there with this guy in my butterfly guard, and he says, oh, actually, you can do this. So if my hand's here, you trap my hand, you go underneath, and you can use it to sweep me. And I was like, oh, that's sweet. And then I thought, oh, that's sweet, because you can do that anywhere in practice and anywhere in life. We see these things that we see as problems, and we run up against them instead of being stopped by them. In practice, what we learn to do is find a way to use that. We use our partner's energy against them. We use this weird position that we're in as an opportunity. And this is like, you guys who have been taking classes online, on our Zoom classes, this is just one giant example of this. Coronavirus is this punch coming at us, and we can sit there and just get punched by it, which is what most of us have done. Or you can see it and go, okay, I'm going to block and counter this, which is what we try to learn to do in our practice. So we say we're going to block and counter. We're going to take our classes online. And, we've got people practicing with us, a very small number of people practicing with us from other countries and other parts of the world that could have never practiced with us in person. That's awesome. And we had somebody just in class the other night in Mexico. We have a student who moved to Israel and is going to be practicing with us. And people, we got Julie in class tonight from Michigan, and other people who are joining us from places that they could have never joined us from if coronavirus hadn't happened. Obviously, coronavirus is terrible. Obviously, it is a real problem that needs to be dealt with. And there is an aspect to it that is just like somebody punching us in the face. We can actually use this and flip it on its head to become stronger in some way. So I'm going to kind of delve a little bit more into that idea with the concept of how do I deal with what is the word that I was saying? With a trauma. Thank you, Ether. So when we have trauma, our experience of trauma is like, this is a terrible thing, and it is something that we need to kind of exercise from us. That's those of us who are kind of more healthfully looking at a way of dealing with trauma, is like, I got to deal with this trauma and kind of get rid of these thoughts or these mental kind of loops that we get into. Most people, I think, in a less healthy way, deal with it like, I'm just going to pretend that's not happening or that didn't happen. So we have traumatic experiences, and most people try to repress. And they don't even try to repress. It's a subconscious process. It's just a thing that happens. This is the psyche's natural way of dealing with super terrible traumatic experiences, is we kind of stuff them aside because they're too painful, and they actually would make it difficult for us to function in life. And we can do better than that. So one of the first ways that we deal with trauma in our practice, and I don't mean that somebody punches us and it's a traumatic experience. Actually, in martial arts, we learn to get punched or to get pushed in whatever way, physically or otherwise, and to actually enjoy that. And what I mean is more so outside of practice. We have this trauma, but then we kind of deal with it in practice. So we deal with it in our meditation. You might sit and meditate and find yourself reliving a traumatic experience. And whether or not you're having something that you would classify as trauma, you have some kind of experience that you are reliving, something that happened during that day maybe or in your past, and you're just replaying the tape, and you're thinking about how you messed up, or you're thinking about what a terrible thing it was. And this is something that we must come face to face with. So as I say, like in sparring, for example, or when you're grappling with somebody in jiu-jitsu, you come face to face with that partner, but it's really your ego that you're coming face to face with. And it is really your ego and your partner's ego that sometimes do the practice, and you don't want that to happen. What we want to do is let the ego go, but we first have to confront it. We confront that it is our ego that is scared of getting punched. It is our ego that needs to win and doesn't want to lose. It's our ego that doesn't want to look dumb by messing up in that moment, looking dumb in front of that partner who we're practicing with, looking dumb in front of the other students in class, or looking dumb in front of Sifu. All of that is a natural and necessary part of practice, just as when we sit, coming face to face with these things, these experiences and thoughts, are a natural and necessary part of our practice. So our mindfulness practice brings those things kind of to a head, and we deal with them. And we don't always deal with them in the best way, but we deal with them, which is better than pretending that nothing happened and repressing. So there's a part in Peace is Every Step, which is a book from Thich Nhat Hanh, which is another spectacular book. This is very much in our philosophy about using everyday life as a mindfulness opportunity and practice. Helps us to do that. But Thich Nhat Hanh has this passage in here that is titled Non-Surgery. And he says, Western medicine emphasizes surgery too much. Doctors want to take out the things that are not wanted. When we have something irregular in our body, too often they advise us to have an operation. The same seems to be true in psychotherapy. Therapists want to help us throw out what is unwanted and keep only what is wanted. But what is left may not be very much. And some of you guys might have that experience of yourself. If I got rid of all the bad stuff, there'd be probably nothing left. But what is left might not be very much. If we try to throw away what we don't want, we may throw away most of ourselves. Instead of acting as if we can dispose of parts of ourselves, we should learn the art of transformation. We can transform our anger, for example, into something more wholesome, like understanding. We do not need surgery to remove our anger. If we become angry at our anger, we will have two angers at the same time. And that's what most of us do. We get angry, and then as soon as we recognize we are angry, just like when you're meditating and you recognize that you have a thought, well, then you get angry at the thought, which is just more thought or more anger. That's not the way to deal with it. So we only have to observe it with love and attention. If we take care of our anger in this way, without trying to run away from it, it will transform itself. This is peacemaking. If we are peaceful in ourselves, we can make peace with our anger. We can deal with depression, anxiety, or any unpleasant feeling in the same way. I think this is a super helpful way of thinking of these parts of ourselves. And Again, my disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, and so if a doctor tells you to get a surgery, you should at least listen to that doctor, maybe get a second opinion. But you get the very clear similarity here, metaphor, with something in your body that you're like, I don't like this, I'm going to take it out. And in some cases, that obviously is the thing that needs to happen. But in some cases, it's not. In some cases, what we can do is we can transform it. I'm not sure exactly how that works in your body. You know, there's certain things that you can't transform, but there are certain things that you can. You know, if your arm is weak, instead of saying I'm going to cut off my arm, you can transform it. You can lift weights or exercise and become stronger with that. That's the closest thing that I'm going to get to. But to be able to take our emotions or our experiences that we see as being negative and these things that we want to cut out of our psyches, cut out of ourselves, that is a very traumatic experience in and of itself, and a very difficult and I think sometimes unhealthy or less effective and efficient way of dealing with these negative emotions, negative thoughts, or negative cycles of thoughts in our minds. So we can instead look at it in a transformative sense, where we have this experience and then we decide, okay, that's anger, what can I transform that into? That's trauma, what can I transform that into? And in this way, we are having a much less kind of combative, violent experience of ourselves and our own inner world. We are, again, dealing with it with love and compassion and peace, so we see this thing inside of us, and instead of fighting against it or instead of trying to get rid of it, we love it. We recognize that this is a part of us. It is not who we are. And we can, in fact, in our practice, learn to separate ourselves from the experience of this anger or these thoughts. This is what we do in meditation, is we recognize it, and then we also recognize that that thought is not who we are, and our ego is not who we are. It is a way of experiencing life. But there are other deeper or larger ways of experiencing life. And if you can kind of take the wider view and just separate yourself from that experience, you can be with it in a way that you are not overwhelmed by it. You're not taken over by it. And then from there, you can decide if you want to transform it, how you would transform it. So the next part of this, he says transforming feelings. This is a little bit longer. I'm going to try to give you a short version of it. But he says the first step in dealing with feelings is to recognize each feeling as it arises. So like when we're meditating and we have a thought that comes up, we can just think thought. That's it. It's a thought. It doesn't have to mean anything more. It doesn't have to take any more control over us. It's just thought, and then we let it go, right? So when we're being mindful, this is really what we're doing in day-to-day life and meditation, and with our own recognition of our emotions, our trauma, wherever it is. The second step is to become one with the feeling. So it's best not to say, go away, fear, I don't like you. It's much more effective to say, hello, fear, how are you today? So we have this negative feeling, and we greet it. And in that way, we are not kind of being beaten back by it. We are not stopped by it. We are not put in a place of ineffectiveness or where we are made weak by it. We are able to just be with it and recognize that an emotion is an emotion. It doesn't mean anything else, right? If you're afraid, it doesn't mean that you as a person are a fearful person and that is a permanent way of being. It means that you are having a fear right now. You're having a thought. That is a thing that you are having. It's an experience that you're having. You can be with it. The third step is to calm the feeling. So as mindfulness is taking good care of your fear, you begin to calm it down. And so, as an example, he says, you can say to yourself, breathing in, I calm the activities of body and mind. You can calm your feeling just by being with it, just like a mother tenderly holding her crying baby. And this is kind of like what our emotions and thoughts are. They're like crybabies. And you don't have to look at that baby and think of it like with disdain, you stupid baby, why are you crying? It's a baby, it's crying, it's what it does. You're stupid if you can't get that that's what a baby's supposed to do. So, and then if you have that thought of you're stupid, then you can just be with that thought too. And we want to be with it without expecting it to be anything else. And calm it. You're trying to calm a baby. You don't yell at the baby. You just kind of be there with it. And just being there with the baby is all that it needs to start to relax and calm down. Your thoughts, your emotions will do the same thing. The fourth step is to release the feeling, to let it go. So you might not be able to let go of a thought or an emotion immediately when you're meditating or when you're practicing, but after this process of being with it and calming it, then you will be able to let it go. If you're meditating, you don't want to take too long with this process, but if it's necessary, then you do it. You take as much time as you need with that thought to be with it, to let it calm, and then to let it go. The fifth step is to look deeply. So this is after we've already let go of, not pushed away, but just let that thought or emotion or trauma go right through us. The fifth step is to look deeply into your baby, your feeling of fear, to see what is wrong, even after the baby's already stopped crying, after the fear is gone. You cannot hold your baby all the time, and therefore you have to look into him to see the cause of what's wrong. By looking, you will see what will help you to begin to transform the feeling. If we have this, a trauma, for example, we have something that continues coming back over and over again. Ignoring it or just letting it go once might not be enough. Probably will not be enough. So we look deeply and we see what is happening there. And then we're able to do whatever there is to be done with it. And as I advised this morning, you're having trauma, you might need to see a therapist. You might need to have a conversation with somebody. At the very least, there is something to look into. And if this process of being with it and letting it go does not resolve it, you might try it a couple of times, and you might try dealing with it in another way, in a more full way. Maybe having a conversation with somebody else, or even having a conversation with yourself. And it is so important for us in our internal practice, in our mindfulness practice, in our meditation, to not treat these types of thoughts as something that we need to push away or repress by burying down into the ground. If you're burying it, you're burying it in a way that you're still mindful and aware of it. So repression is not that. You can take nourishment from it by being with it. So when you have that thing that there is to deal with, we can be with it and get nourishment from that, get energy, and we are able to transform. Through this transforming of our emotions, through this transforming of our thoughts that we keep going back to, those tapes, through this transformation of the weeds, we transform these mind weeds into flowers or vegetables or whatever's in your garden. And that is it. That is the process of our life. Through our practice, we transform rather than get rid of. Transformation is a process of becoming stronger, of becoming more creative, of finding where this thing felt like a challenge, and instead of being stopped by it, by that problem, we envelop it, and we use that to become more creative and find stronger ways and more complete ways of being. So when you're meditating tonight, if you have some kind of an experience, some kind of negative thought, some kind of traumatic thing that returns to you, and I'm not saying I want you to sit down and purposefully look for that, but if it happens, then this is the process that we go through, right? We feel it, we be with it, and we kind of see how the transformation is possible with that. What can we transform this into? It's just like a habit. If you take a bad habit, this thing that you don't want to do, and you try to just get away from it or stuff it away, it keeps coming back. But if you transform the action into something else, then we are strengthened by that, and we have replaced the habit with something that's good for us. It's the same thing with our thoughts and our emotions in this way. So let's work on that tonight if it happens. Now, a normal meditation, what you're trying to do is you recognize the thought, the feeling as it arises. Maybe you label it as thought or feeling. It's fear, and you just label it as fear. You don't make it mean anything else. You just allow it to go. You don't push it away. You just allow it to go of its own accord, in its own time, in its own way. But if it's not going, then you be with it. Be with this crying baby, and then eventually it will become calm. You will be able to let it go, and you will be able to transform it into something else. So in meditation, we don't want to be transforming our thoughts into other thoughts. We want to think of it transforming it into maybe a feeling of calm. Thought is energy. Emotion is energy. So we can transform it into an energy that kind of fuels our meditation. And it allows us to, sit for longer, sit stronger, and then at the end of meditation, if there is something that there is to deal with, then we deal with it. Write it down, write to yourself, ask questions to yourself, have a conversation with whoever you need to have a conversation with. And in this way, we learn transformation. We learn it for ourselves, and we learn it in a way that is empowering for every area of our life. So let's practice that tonight. Sit comfortably.